Good day. Um, Today I kind of wanted to talk about, well, it's not that I want to talk about it, but on my site there, a few people, kind of mentioned and been talking about um, meeting up with your birth family and things like that, and I've done that. Um, it's not a fairy tale, and it's unfortunately it's a very traumatic process. It's psychologically significant to the individual. And in Canada, at least, I believe it's mandatory province wide, besides Alberta, where I grew up, to have some sort of counseling before you go through the process, and for good reason, because it's some really advanced psychological stuff we're talking about. Um, I guess it comes down to this. Every person grows up, I think, overall, imagining what it would have been like if they were raised by different parents, right? So that fairy tale mentality. Um, but that's a fantasy. But the adoptee and the regular person share this fantasy growing up. The difference being is that the adoptee secretly knows that they don't, well, knows that they don't come from these parents, that these aren't actually their parents for the most part. I mean, forgive me, I quite often speak in generalizations more geared towards my situation, which is a very huge portion of adoptees, taking at birth. So once, you kind of imagine, you see people, you imagine how your parents would be, and characteristics develop within yourself about who these people might be, and it tends to be this grandiose thing, right? It could be anywhere from your mother could be a hooker, junkie, prostitute, criminal, gangster, to a politician or an intellectual or a doctor, and anywhere in between. So there's part of you, well, part of me, let's speak for me. There was part of me growing up that kept a part of myself that was open to be anything. So hopefully you can understand that that's a big thing, that you're keeping a little piece of yourself separate, um, in case maybe you're invited back into the clan, or there was a mistake, or there's this fairy tale ending, that somehow there's a way out of this, and that if you can get there, you'll be okay. But you also want to make sure you're exactly how you were supposed to be for these people that gave you away by mistake, in hopes, or whatever it might have been. But when I was about 28 years old, I was going through some more life crises situation. I was going through difficulties with my own child and with child support and trying to raise that money, getting involved maybe with some of the wrong people, and I was losing it. I was losing myself, and trying to gain footing on our very my very unstable foundations of who I am as a person. So at that time, I decided to hire a private investigator. I'd poked around on the internet trying to, track down, via last names and things like that. But I ended up getting a private investigator who was able to track down my birth father, and I'll leave that story maybe for later. But was also able to track down my birth mother and let them know that I was looking for them. Now, I'm going to tell the birth mother's story now, because that's come to an end. I don't, there's just not going to be a relationship that I continue on there. Um, it's just not really possible. And that's only happened this week. But let me explain how it played out, or at least part of it. Eventually, through these videos, I'd hope to give a full understanding of my complete life experience, which has many facets to the adoption story, um, and many pitfalls, that hopefully me telling these stories can help other people either avoid or you know not end up in even worse situations, thinking they're alone and to the world, and their experience is unacceptable or whatnot. So um, when I first got a hold of my birth mother through the private investigator, he contacted her. I explained I was looking, and I received a letter back saying that uh, she could not meet me because her current husband didn't said that if she met me, that he would leave her. So, of course, I understood. Of course, um, didn't change the fact that at that time I really needed my mother, and I needed some answers. But again, I mean, our needs and wants and our lives are they're second class, absolute third, fourth, fifth. I don't know. We're very down the scale of our needs and wants being met. So, anyways, I made it through my struggles. I went through hell, emotional turmoil, a nervous breakdown. The search for the birth family triggered a full blown nervous breakdown that took probably a good year just to get myself back to any sort of normalcy that I could lead any sort of functional life. I ended up living with Christians up north, which is were related to my father's wife's side of the family. Anyways, got really confusing. But the point being is, a couple years later, after things had settled down and I'd gotten myself on more sure footing, had got a new girlfriend, had moved out to you know Victoria on Vancouver Island here in Canada, and was working, and life wasn't perfect, but it was okay. And I put that that madness behind me and tucked it away in its box again, and was enjoying my life, and was in a fairly good place for myself, playing some video games and spending a lot of time in nature and living on the ocean, and it was great. But anyway, so I was contacted by the private investigator, and he said now that my birth mother did want to meet me. So it turns out her husband had left her anyways. So, and she wanted to make contact. So we emailed back and forth a little bit, and she was interested in my poetry and whatnot, and put a little book together and some pictures. And she seems kind of sweet and nice, and maybe a little bit naive, and I don't know, it whatever it was. But she was living in the next province over, so she made arrangements to come out and visit. And at that time I was playing this video game online called EverQuest. I don't know if anybody knows of it, but it's a MMORPG where you can play with a lot of people, different people from around the world, and from your own home. So she thought that was interesting, and this new person, I kind of wanted to get to know her, so I invited her to play along, and she did. And anyways, some of my buddies from my guild and whatnot started acting kind of funny, and I was a little bit, thrown off. And finally, someone was spit it out and said that my mother had been sexting with, or trying to sext with some of the other people. And then I found out that she had gone down to the United States and surprised the guy I had started this guild with on this video game at his workplace, and was looking to hook up with him. Anyways, he didn't come out of his office and didn't meet her, even though they'd been, I don't know, supposedly carrying on some sort of little romance behind his wife's back. So finding out about that was tough. I was embarrassed. Um, you know, I was under this impression that having my birth mother back in my life, that she would come in and be that unconditional sort of love, and somehow that bond that was broken would heal itself. And I don't know if that's possible. I don't. Um, I mean, the idea allowed her to get away with all kinds of crazy things because this person had been a secret, fantastical sort of person. Um, but I mean, trying to get to the reality of who my birth mother was, and from the fantasy of who my birth mother was, um, there was a lot of leaps and bounds that took place, and it was just a little bit too much. So, anyways, I ended up, I think, kicking her out of the well, explaining to her that we're she had to leave the guild. It was too embarrassing, and this was part of my life. So initially she came into my life, and then started, selfishly, barging her way into situations, for her own selfish needs and wants. Right? I mean, if you're lonely for all, I mean, go find a guy. I mean, but I mean, don't come into my game, into my little bit of enjoyment, and start embarrassing me as my new mother, and somehow, think you can get away with it. So then the next scenario, we stayed in touch still, and the next scenario was that, my girlfriend and I had broken up, and she moved into her own place, and I got word that, my mother said she was moving out to Victoria. I thought, well, great, having a parent out here would be nice, and I was trying to understand what family is, really. And anyways, then I found out she was moving in with my ex-girlfriend, and the ex-girlfriend didn't really want her to move in with her, supposedly. So she's like, well, I didn't know what to say, and blah 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 blah. Da, 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 da. So she'd already made arrangements to come out. So I said, well, I had to say, I mean, Lauren doesn't want you moving in with her. So you're gonna have to move here, and we'll look at getting a bigger place. So I let her, live on my couch for a while, but she didn't seem interested in moving into a bigger place or these sort of things, and it was too much to have this megalith of a person into my life, and then have them right in my living room sleeping on my couch. And on top of that, she started getting weird on the video game again, and was, hooking up with some guy from the States. And so eventually I got her a one bedroom apartment in the building I was living in, and she was pissed off about it. She felt I was kicking her out and I was abandoning her, and I talked to her about it. I tried to explain, I need a bit more space. We can still be mother and son, but let's space it up a bit here. And no, like a child, like an absolute child. And to be perfectly frank, that's what it was. It was my birth mother came into my life, and was a little brat. And this the terrifying thing is that once she moved into this place, the guy that she moved up was 5 years younger than me, and they played video games together like little children. So she basically wanted a son and a sexual partner all wrapped into one, it seems like. And from some of the readings I've done about adoption, adoptees, reunion, that sort of thing, I mean, it's not uncommon for this to trigger sort of weird scenarios. So at the base of it, I almost feel like there was some sort of, like, incestual rejection that she felt, and still to this, and this was, you know, almost 15 years ago, maybe not quite that long, 14, 13, 14 years ago. Um, and anyways, a few months after that, I ended up moving back to Alberta, leaving her out there. We had a little bit of a break with Facebook. I ended up, trying to at least be have a connection, like a friendship. Um, and she, at one time I joked around, and I mean, I have a pretty good sense of humor. I said, well, when are you trying to be nice? Like, so when are you and Eric going to give me a new little brother? And joking around. So she blocked me on Facebook at that point, and I had to like, go after her to get her back on and say I was kidding and this and that. I had to continually explain that it wasn't that I was kicking her out of my life. It was in my personal space. I'm an introvert. Blah 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 blah. So that being said, I mean, I haven't seen her since. Even though now we live in almost the same city again, I haven't seen her since I left Victoria. And anyways, but I kept her on the Facebook, and oh, it's just such a long story. But I ended up meeting my little brother and my cousin. I ended up letting my birth aunt live in my condo where I was for a couple months because she was between places. Apparently, there was a big family feud going on that I didn't know about because, she doesn't tell me anything about my family, and I'm not really included in my family. So, anyways, the feud was between the two sisters and the other sister that I let stay at my place while she was rent my place, pay rent. And so that was a big deal that I had done that, and there was this real sense of a grudge. Again, just absolute immaturity. And anyway, so that was a big thing for a long time, and I just rarely tried to talk to her. I had her on my Facebook when I could figure out what to do with this relationship that seemed to be going nowhere. And then that sister ended up dying a couple months ago, and I went to the funeral. And she was very didn't really say much about it and didn't go to her own sister's funeral. Then last week my maternal grandmother died, and so I'd sent a message saying, I'm sorry to hear about grandmother. I don't even feel right calling grandma. And I sent another message saying, well, it'll be nice to see you at the funeral. I didn't hear anything else. So, and I could see that she'd seen the messages. So then I wrote back, I said, over the last 12, 13 years here, I get the impression you wish I had stayed abandoned. And, I don't really know what to do, and this, that, and the other thing. And, if you don't want me to go to the funeral, if you don't want to see me, then maybe you should let me know this. And then she replied back something like, I moved out to be with you in Victoria, and you kicked me out and took my money. She gave me $3,000 to put towards my child. That's what she's given me. She offered it. She said, no, I'm doing this, blah blah blah, and I accepted. I didn't get the money personally. Like, she contributed to her own grandchild, and threw that out there, that I took her money and kicked her out. So she's been holding that grudge for all this time. Not, hey, sorry I came into your life and started trying to bang your friends. Hey, sorry I, invaded your couch. Sorry, like, none of these things. That she invaded my life, caused destruction, brought destruction and chaos, instead of putting some sort of peace and order back into my life from the things that have been missing from my life. And on top of that, not even an inkling of the reality that she abandoned me to the fucking world. So, needless to say, I didn't say anything back. She blocked me on Facebook again right after that. So, uh, I just, it was just finally this thing like, we're done. How that it comes back to the tragedy of the adoptee. To have someone who does those things to you, to still want those people in your life, and then to go back for more rejection and humiliation from such an immature, pathetic human being. And you know what? I, it, it took me a while to think about it and whatever, and I plan to do this video, but um, that in and of itself is, I can see, is going to be more and more of a relief. The trauma that happened because of that separation, you know, yeah, that affected her too. And I'm so happy when I see the birth mothers that turn around and admit that they were duped, admit that this isn't right, that they spent all their time trying to figure out how to get back with their children, to understand adoption, to research it, to do all these things because of the thing they did to repair the tear in their relationship with their child. These women are heroes to me, and it's just unfortunate that my own birth mother had to be a villain in my story, because that's kind of what she was made into, and what she followed the path that was put in front of her, and never veered from it. And you know, we're all victim to that, I think, in one way, shape, or form. It's easier to follow the crowd, and I just can't do that anymore for myself. Um, you know, I need to have my own base, my own personality, my own grounding in this world, and you know, to have to truck through this chaos of adoption by myself, without any sort of supports, without anything, knowing how much money the adoption industry is worth, knowing the industry that's going on, knowing the malevolence, and knowing that they're not spending any money on their own cleanup, and then just, you know, pushing us out the other end to the psychologists, the police departments, the drug and alcohol industry, the just every negative thing that can happen when you live a life thinking that you're a screw up, and that, you know, every other adoptee is fine. Why are you screwed up? Even though, you know, once you really dig into it, you start seeing that every other adoptee isn't fine, and that we all do suffer, and that, you know, we may um, be in situations for long terms of functionality. I mean, you know, I was making a six-figure income, and I was responsible for other people under me in management, and all sorts of things, and making people tons of money. But I was doing it for the pat on the head. You know, I could be successful in anything I want to do, but it's the acceptance that we seek out, and I think that's we're taken advantage of at every opportunity. Um, you know, right from the get-go, right? Because, you know, our mother was so brave. We gave up our family so our mother didn't have to take responsibility. Oh, your adoptive parents are so awesome that, you know, two people could take a stranger and love him as their own. Well, that's bullshit. It was just a woman who couldn't have kids, who was sickly, and needed a kid to fit in with her friends and family. And guess what I provided? Hey, I get to make you look like a mother, regardless of whether or not you are. And not only that, an altruistic mother. Since you couldn't have your own, you don't want to be looked at as infertile. You're an altruistic person who chose to raise someone else's child. So the reality is that I'm the hero in both those situations as a baby. But I'm treated like, oh, I was the saved victim, right? I was the saved, this that was I was saved from a horrible situation of having your own family. Um, no, that's not true at all. I was made into a victim without choice, and was forced to serve these two roles without payment. Um, and and still at 43 years old, I still get to be the grown up, uh, and getting rejected by a person who doesn't deserve to have me in their life anyways. And how pathetic is it that, just on the off chance that that person can turn their attitude around and, be a supportive member of my life instead of a destructive, chaotic force, I kept that door open. Well, she closed the door. I'm going to board it up and lock it. So that's just a little snippet into my birth mother. I'll get into the other side with the birth family, and then there's some other scenarios that are talked about in adoption that I haven't even cracked into yet. Um, there's just so many amazing scenarios that I've gone through, trying to find myself and trying to find the answers to what's missing. And I don't know if that what's missing can ever be retrieved again, but I do feel that if I can get to a point where I can cut ties with these things that force me into being someone I'm not, um, that I do have special qualities because of the way that this is played out that could be used for my own benefit, the benefit of others, and hopefully the benefit of other adoptees, because I do think that we all are very amazing creatures to have been so resilient and such survivors to be able to survive in environments that um, weren't meant for us. And that, let's face the facts. I mean, the people deciding these environments are not the right people to have been making these decisions for the most part. And for those adoptees who had great, happy lives and, are more than happy with their situation, I mean, all the power to you. That's what the world is talking about. That's what the world sees. So I don't need your comments. Thanks. Um, you know, Fantastic that it worked out for you. But just like, if you fed 100 people a glass of some drink and it killed half of them, uh, you don't want the other one saying, "Oh, but it's so great. It's just so great." When half the people are dying from this product, same goes with booze, cigarettes, whatever you want. I mean, there's always going to be people that are like, "Yay, yay for this horrible thing." Okay, there's other reasons behind that. So for those of you who had a good life, great. I don't even know why you're here checking this out. For those of you who struggle and are alone, or have these sort of problems that we seem to share, this is for you. And God bless and all that fun jazz. So thanks. Bye.